Okay, so this is question 5 of 11.1. This should be a good introduction to figure out what to do in 11.1 in StatCrunch. So what we're going to look at first is identifying the null and alternative hypothesis is. And so we're looking to test whether proportion 1 is greater than proportion 2. And once again, our null hypothesis is always going to be an equal sign. And it's not going to be P1 equals 0 because we're talking about two different proportions. So we're saying that they're going to equal each other, or we're testing whether or not P1 is greater than. So this one right there. Now we're going to find this test statistic in StatCrunch. So basically what we're doing is we have two samples from different samples. So it could be either they were at different times of the same thing, or you picked, I don't know, somehow they're different, and we're seeing whether or not in the second sample, if the first sample is bigger than the second sample. And so we're talking about proportions because there's a P, which means proportion. And so we are going to go into stats and proportion stats, but we're given two different samples. So we go to two samples with summary. And make sure to put in your samples as you see them. So X1 is for sample 1 and X2 is for sample 2. Okay, and so now we're gonna, it doesn't look quite the exact same as this, but we're gonna use the same signs and everything. So we're gonna leave it at 0 because what we're testing is if the two proportions are the same, which if they are, then if you have P1 minus P2, then that would equal 0. So if they're both 0.5, you have 0.5 minus 0.5, that equals 0. Or if they're different and if P1 is greater than. So if P1 is greater than, and so for instance, if P1 is 0.5 and P2 is less than, and P2 would be like 0.3, your result would be greater than 0. So keep that sign the same. And then your z-stat is the test statistic. And your p-value is as stated. And now we're gonna decide what this means. And so we're gonna compare our p-value to the level of significance. And so I'm gonna just write down what our p-value is. This 0, oops, that's not the one I wanted to use. Let's use this one. 0.353, we'll round up. And then our level of significance is 0.10. We'll put a 0 in front. And our p-value is greater than 0.353 is greater than 0.010. And so if it's greater than, then we do not reject the null. So do not reject the null hypothesis. And this is because there's not sufficient evidence to conclude that P1 is greater than P2. And there you have it.